Welcome to Bible Prayers and Untold Stories, where every whisper verse is truth, and every story brings light to the soul. Let us journey through the sacred words and uncover the wisdom hidden in prayer. There are meetings that are not recorded in history books. No lights, no cameras, no declarations. Just silence and an invitation from God. A pope who bears the name of an ancient saint. A cardinal, a shepherd of tears and mercy. Between the thick walls of the apostolic see, they met not to discuss power, but to listen. Not to dominate, but to accompany. From that moment, a fire was lit. Not a fire that burns, but a fire that smolders, burning in faith and truth. A revelation was born not to shock, but to awaken sleeping souls. The story you are about to hear is not a biography. It is an interior journey, a return to what was lost, mercy, presence, and light from the deepest part of the soul. This is not a story about two men. It is a story about a church learning to listen, and a world waiting to be healed. If there was ever a moment that would not be recorded in history books, but could shake the soul of an entire church, it was this. A high-angle view of the Vatican at sunset, then zooms in on a thick wooden door, carved with the papal emblem. No cameras, no transcripts, no advisors, no protocol. Just the presence of two souls, a pope and a cardinal, in a room where power retreats, and truth enters. The light from the high window falls on the dust in the air. Leo XIV sits opposite Cardinal Tagle, saying nothing. Between these two men, there were no words, but a call that came not from men, but from the deepest place, from the Spirit. The scene fades. The voice becomes soft as if whispering. They did not come to discuss the future. They came to listen to the past, to listen to the silent cry of a fractured church, and the echoes of prayers that were never spoken. No dialogue, just Leo's face, eyes closed, hand lightly gripping the old rosary. Tagle looks up at the ceiling, tears not falling, but his eyes are red. A beam of light shines on the statue of St. Francis hanging in the room. This is not a political agreement, not a power conspiracy, but a moment of revelation, a moment of silence to listen, not the sound of human voice, but the whisper of God. Leo and Tagle kneeled together, not facing each other, but facing a small altar in the middle of the room. A candle burned. They did not recite prayers, only prayed with their eyes, with their sighs, with their presence. In the darkness, there are prayers that do not need words. There are things that are understood only when we are fully present. And there are souls called by name among millions of voices. The two stood by the window, looking down at St. Peter's Square. Below, a stream of people were praying in silence. The gentle wind blew, stirring their simple vestments. Could it be? In that silence, an invitation has been sent, a mission is beginning, not for the strong, but for those who dare to be humble to the end. This meeting is not just the beginning of a story. It is a wake-up call for a new era of faith. The desolate streets of Chicago's West Side in the 1960s. A small boy in a thin coat walks with his mother in the cold winter. The bells of St. Agnes Church ring in the distance. Before he became pope, he was just a child in the slums of Chicago. No one wrote his name in the prophecy. No one called him the chosen one. But God did. The boy bows his head to pray the Lord's Prayer in the slum kitchen. His parents place their hands on his shoulders, silent but sacred. A young Robert Francis Prevost enters the Augustinian monastery. The camera focuses on his hands as he takes off his watch, takes off his shirt, and puts on his brown habit. The chant of Fiat Voluntas Tua rings softly. You did not enter the monastery to find a position, but to learn to listen, not to change the world, but to be transformed from within. The image shifts to Peru, dusty ground, naked children, laughter as Hermano Roberto brings rice to an old mother. Robert preaches Mass in a bamboo chapel in the mountains of Peru. A simple wooden cross hangs at an angle. The villagers gathered around, listening to him in silence in Quechua. They called him Hermano, not because he was a priest, but because he was there when they were hungry. He was there when they buried their children. He was there when no one else was left. From a funeral in the mountains, cut to the Vatican in 2024. Press image. Robert F. Prevost, elected Pope, takes name Leo XIV. The day he was called to the Apostolic See. No one expected it. No one prepared. Not even he. But there are things that don't require preparation. Only obedience. Robert, dressed in a simple white robe, steps onto the balcony of St. Peter's Square. He doesn't raise his hand in greeting, just bows his head in silence. The crowd falls silent. Leo XIV refuses to wear a colorful robe, choosing only a brown habit under his white chasuble. He sits alone in the chapel. Candlelight casts his shadow on the wall. I did not come to the Vatican to reform. I came to hear the breathing of the church again. No noise, no slogans, just a silent prayer. Lord, show me your path. Leo XIV walks down the ancient corridor. A figure stands waiting, Cardinal Tagle. No one speaks. They nod, clasp hands, and together they enter the familiar room where the story begins in part 1. When God calls someone, he does not always use thunder or lightning. Sometimes it is just the familiar footsteps of a brother back where he needs him most. A man who did not seek the throne, but was chosen to keep the flame alive. The sea breeze blows through the rusted tin roofs of Cavite, Philippines. A boy helps his father mend a net in the afternoon sun. His mother sits praying the rosary under a coconut tree. The voice resounded softly as memories returned. There are those who are born to lead. There are those who are born to accompany. But few are born to cry for humanity. Tagle's eyes as a child, bright and sad, as if seeing many things that childhood should not have seen. The boy Tagle celebrated Mass in the small church of the fishing village. The sunlight through the stained glass reflected on his face. His lips trembled as he recited the Lord's Prayer. Since he was a child, Luis Antonio cried, not because he was punished, not because he fell, but because he saw his friend without shoes, because he heard the moans of an old woman who no one cared for, because he saw God suffering in the flesh of the poor. Tagle grew up, studied theology in Manila, then got his doctorate in Rome. But he always returned to the slums, where he ate with the poor, holding the hands of street children. You could have become a scholar, a theologian with a golden seat in the academies, but you chose to sit next to a mother who lost her child in an earthquake, to cry with those who have no more tears, and listen to the cries for help that the world has ignored. Tagle preached at the Manila Cathedral. No spotlights, just him and a silent congregation. He told a father who lost his son in war. His eyes were red. A sob rang out from him or from the congregation. No one knew. He did not preach with reason. He did not preach with doctrine. He preached with his own heart, a heart that could bleed, that could break, that could commune. The camera pans over tearful faces. A mother, a disabled young man, an elderly priest. Tagle visits Sudan, Syria, Ukraine. He does not speak long. He just comes, hugs widows, kisses the hand of an orphan, puts his hand on his heart as if to say, I am here. I see you. He does not represent the structure. He represents the soul of the church, the soul that once forgot to cry. Now he teaches it again with his own tears. Tagle enters the room with Leo XIV, as at the end of part 2. He says nothing. He just puts his hand on the Pope's shoulder, bows his head in prayer. Two men, two hearts are silent. Not everyone can lead with words, but there are those, just by being silent and crying, can make the whole church listen and change. He was not the strongest, but he felt the deepest. A light rain fell on the roof of the Apostolic Palace one night. Inside, only candles were lit. Leo XIV and Tagle sat on either side of a cold stone table. On the table, no papers, just an old rosary and a worn Bible. There are meetings to plan the future, but this is not a meeting. This is the 11th hour, when God whispers what he is about to do, to those who dare to be silent long enough to hear. Leo XIV closed his eyes, fingering his rosary. A light like a mist enveloped him. He began to speak, slowly, as if not speaking himself. Leo XIV whispering. I heard, in a night of prayer, not a voice, but a presence, that a wind would come not from outside, but from within the church, and there would be walls falling not because of hostility, but because we no longer remember why they were built. Tagle bowed his head. He was not surprised, not alarmed, just silent as if he had known all along. His hands tightened on the Bible on the table. He looked at Leo, eyes of confirmation without words. No proof, no explanation, because the chosen ones. Sometimes there is no need to understand. Just enter. Leo XIV, you are the keeper of the fire, not a prominent fire, but a smoldering flame that keeps the faith from going out in the night. The revelation does not come to frighten people. It comes to awaken those who are asleep. It is not the enemy outside who destroys the church, but the dryness of compassion, the silence in the face of suffering, and a habit of sitting still when God is walking outside. Tagle walks alone through the dark corridor. In his hand is a small candle. He stops before a side altar, where the statue of the Virgin Mary appears in a dim light. He kneels, not praying aloud, just silently weeping as he used to. Tagle has not been given a title, no ordination, but he has been given the most fearful task, to keep watch over a sleeping church, to keep the light when there is only darkness. Leo XIV stands on the closed balcony, looking down at the empty square. It is not yet dawn. He does not speak. Just put your hand on your heart, then look up to the sky. Below, a child lights a candle. Then dozens, hundreds of others are lit all over the square. That night, they did not make a strategy. They did not draw a map of reform. They just said to each other that the only light left is mercy, and if the church is to survive, it must return to what it was at the beginning, to sit with the poor, to listen to the suffering, and to weep with those who have no more tears. No one is chosen because he is strong. Only those who know how to be weak are entrusted with keeping the flame. The first rays of sunlight touch the ancient tiles of the Vatican. Doves gather around St. Peter's Square. Leo XIV walks slowly through the brightly lit corridor, a worn Bible in his hand. When silence has done its work, when tears have watered the parched land, that is when God will step forth into the morning light. The camera pans out. The square is crowded, not by an invitation, but by an invisible faith that is spread. People gather, as if called by a wordless call. Leo XIV stands on the balcony, not wearing a bright robe, only a simple white habit. No waving, no announcement. He places his hand on his heart, then opens his arms like a cross. Whisper, his voice, no microphone, but echoing to the viewer's soul. Return, with mercy, with the sobbing of humanity, with the gospel not to keep, but to give. His face is radiant in the morning light. The congregation below is in tears, not from emotion, but from the feeling that they have been forgiven. Tagle stands behind, not on the balcony, but in the small chapel. He is kneeling. His eyes are fixed on the Blessed Sacrament, his mouth moving silently. Between them, no throne, just the Blessed Sacrament. True friendship needs no honor. It needs only to be offered. On the altar, between two people, no power, only the Holy Spirit. Around the world, small dioceses open their doors to the poor. Nuns hug the homeless. Priests sit on the beach to hear confessions. Parishioners pray together in refugee camps. The church does not change from Rome. It changes from the people no one saw, no one remembered, no one congratulated. But they listened, knelt, loved to the end. They themselves are the proof of revelation, the image of Leo XIV praying, embedded in the light of the rising sun, blending with the scene of Tagle walking among an anonymous crowd. He holds the hand of an old man, holds a baby, then turns his back to the camera, gradually blending into the crowd as if disappearing. There are those who are chosen not to stand out, but to become part of the flesh and blood of humanity. There are leaders who do not need power. just to lead people back to love. A candle is placed on the stone table. A soft song rings out. Ubi cerdicity amor Deus ibi est. Where there is love, there is God. A white writing appears, and the light has not been overcome by darkness, because it is kept in hearts that know how to cry, know how to listen, and know how to love.